LBerry, and she's given us a description of living in the rural South in the 1930s. And of course, Miss Berry, let's continue our conversation to have you to sort of talk about some of the agricultural situations in the South. I think you mentioned earlier that a large number of folks engaged in agricultural production, but I think in reality it was probably picking or chopping cotton. Let's talk about it from the sharecropping situation that existed in many areas of the South at this particular time.
Yes. Well, as you know in the book, the main characters were sharecroppers. And we all know that sharecropping is not a profitable type of lifestyle. I mean, I've never known a sharecropper who became a multimillionaire. My parents, and this book is pretty much based on a lot about their life and some of my life. They did that because at the time they had very little education and they didn't have any skills and they had no other choices, they felt. But let me say this, even though they were sharecroppers and they had very little education, they had a lot of common sense because they were able to rear 8 children and educate them, and they had a desire and dream for those children to do better. But the sharecropping system, of course, you know, it is basically tenants living on the land and being provided housing, food, and seed, and they harvest the land, and then in return they are to get a half of the revenue from the crops. And basically by the time all of the seed and the tools and all of that is paid for, there's really nothing left, so they're basically just existing. They're not going to ever get rich or really have anything.
There's little upward mobility, as you say, as a sociologist, in sharecropping. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. But the main character in the book, she realized early on that they weren't going to go too far doing this. And there, in the book, there was a unique opportunity where she had a chance to make some changes, and she did. And it made a very big difference to that family. The husband became ill, and by that time there were about 4 or 5 little children. And she knew she had to make some choices then about how to keep the family together, and she did. I'm not going to go into what those choices are. You have to read the book to find out. But I think anyone reading that will see that when opportunities come our way, if we take advantage of those, it can make a very, very big difference in our lifestyle.
You know, I think, and of course, what you're talking about here are some of the challenges that people have to meet. And regardless of the kind of social economic situation that people find themselves in, many are able to overcome whatever situation, whatever negative situation that they are in. And I think that this is what you're saying in reference to your parents' ability to be able to live in a sharecropping system, but at the same time to recognize how very, very important it was to educate the children. You see, I think you've indicated here that they might have been poor, but at the same time they knew that education was important. And I would also like to say in reference to this, Ms. Berry, that that does not necessarily apply only to people who live in the rural South, because I'm a Southerner too, and we didn't live on the sharecropping system as such. But we all lined up in the morning, as you probably know of some of the people who came out to your farm and et cetera, and waited on the transportation to come by and bring us to your situation. So talk about, from that perspective, about how it must have been living in that kind of situation.
Well, one thing I can say this personally, growing up, having picked cotton and chopped cotton, it really motivated me to get an education. And sometimes I say we need more cotton fields. Now that may sound ironic, but when I think about the fact that it did motivate me, it motivated me to go to school and to get good grades. I always said if I could get to Tennessee State University, they wouldn't have to worry about me getting out. I kind of ran away to school, so to speak. That's kind of a joke. I mean, my parents were behind me all the way. But that type of system motivates people. And when I look around me and other people that I grew up with, I'm finding a lot of them did the same things that we did. They went to school because there were very limited choices if they didn't.
I think it's a common kind of situation, and that's why I wanted you to talk about that system as such, because not, there are a lot of negatives that are associated with it, but at the same time, there is the challenge that many people like yourself and myself, we understood the challenges and we were willing to accept the challenges. I think that you said that you're from a family of 8 children. I'm from a family of 9. There are 9 of us, and all of us were able to achieve essentially what your family was able to achieve. And so I think there's a common thread that sort of is a part of all of that.
Yes, and when you grow up in that lifestyle, at least we were taught to really work together, family unity, because when you have very little, you have to be able to share. And even when we came to college, we shared what we had.
And realized that there was somebody back at home working every day in the cotton fields in order to send money there that you might be able to. Yeah, I know those experiences too. That's what we're looking for. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those kinds of experiences, because I think that those kinds of experiences are more important in terms of helping to lay the foundation of what you have to do. You're there working and getting education, but you also recognize that the younger persons are back at home, and they have to follow you, and they will follow you because you, gave that example. Would that be a fair characterization of some of the individuals in your...
That is accurate. Now, I tell you, my mother and father's dream, and especially my mother, was that all of her children would go to college. And 6 out of 8 did. All of us completed high school. She was very disappointed that the first 2 chose not to. But they did other things, and it's in the book. She wanted all of us to be teachers. As I said, back in her day, the intellectual blacks in the community
status was connected with very good.
Yes, and that's what she wanted all of us to be teachers. Some of us did become teachers and some other things, but that was her dream.
Okay, and of course, Ms. Berry, we've got about 8 or 10 seconds before the end of this segment today, and then we'll come back for the 3rd segment. We'll give you an opportunity to say some other things about this book. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Let me tell you how very, very